All right. Shall we get started? Nice. Okay. Well, depending on where you are in the world, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Don't say good night yet. Okay. Um, or we can just say namaste or tashile. Those are good any time of the day. So, those of you, I do see some new names here on the Zoom. So, hello, welcome. I'm Tenzin Namjong, and I'm very happy to have been asked by the good folks at Tibetan Buddhism to give this series of teachings on Dharma for difficult times. So, if you haven't tuned into the last session, then all the sessions will be put up on the YouTube channel of Tibetan Buddhism. I think it's the Buddhist Center, right? So come on, very easy. If not, I tell you, YouTube will know, and then you can watch the sessions that you missed live. You can rewatch the sessions that you um, already have watched, and then that way can review and deepen your knowledge. Okay, well. Um, We have about 90 minutes here today. And in general, we have 5 weeks, 5 sessions. And so let's just jump into it. There's a lot of material to cover. My thought was, right, when we talked about Dharma for difficult times, that we could go into a sort of crash course, brief overview of the entire Buddhadharma. And that would take maybe 3 sessions. And then for the last 2 sessions, we will really kind of delve into some of the more contemporary issues that we are facing in the world around anxiety, political polarization, um, yeah, digital distraction, and yes, just a general decline in many of the things that maybe we remember from earlier in our life. Yeah. People from different political parties being friends. Yeah, you remember that? Yes. All right. So let's just jump in. And oh, yes. And then I also wanted to leave time for adequate questions at the end. And so here we go. All right. You can see that? Great. Oh, so in general, yeah, I mentioned last time, but it's worth mentioning again that in Buddhism, and especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the motivation for which we undertake our actions is so highly emphasized because it is our motivation underlying the action rather than the action itself that determines whether the action is virtuous, non-virtuous, and so forth. So, especially when we come into the teaching, then we should try to generate the motivation, thinking that the purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings. And in order to benefit sentient beings in the best way, I must first fully develop all my inner qualities to their highest potential and abandon all faults of my mind. Then and only then will I be able to work in the most effective, beneficial way for sentient beings. And therefore, in order to do that, I need to learn about the various techniques, methods, in order to transform my mind from its current state to the state of full awakening. And therefore, I'm going to participate in the lecture, And then, later you can say, therefore, I'm going to do this meditation, I'm going to do this practice, I'm going to, study this Dharma text and so forth. And then, even more broadly speaking, those of you who are, you know, having jobs or doing various quote unquote worldly activities, you can bring this kind of bodhicitta motivation even to those worldly activities. And therefore, before you go to work, you can think, same bodhicitta, the purpose of your life is to benefit all sentient beings. And therefore, okay, you're going to now go to your job. And now you're going to be of benefit to all your customers, your clients, you know, um, everyone you come into contact with, right? So your coworkers, your bosses, maybe you work for a public company and you can think, I'm going to go to work to benefit the shareholders of my company. Okay, that's good. You know, those shareholders want happiness too. Okay. And then you can think, well, I am going to now earn the money that will, pay for my living expenses, food, shelter, clothing. But then you can think, well, I am going to also save some of the money I've then earned, so I can then go on retreat. I can go to attend teachings. I can, practice generosity and help others. So all of this then becomes uh, you know possible to transform the daily activities into Dharma. And then even we might think quite mundane things like eating, drinking, sleeping. Those two can be done with a bodhicitta motivation. And to say I need to practice uh, Dharma so I can be of most benefit for sentient beings. Therefore, I need to have a healthy body because this body is the vehicle with which I practice. And therefore, I'm going to take care of my health by now eating this meal, by sleeping, by going to the gym and exercising. All these things with a bodhicitta motivation then can become, part of the path. Okay? All right. So then, if we can bring our bodhicitta motivation uh, to, eating, sleeping, going to the gym, and so forth, then for sure we can bring bodhicitta to now listening to a Dharma teaching. So now, especially, um, think we're now going to receive this teaching so we can learn about the various methods to completely actualize our inner potential and become fully awakened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay. So now, uh, usually we do this preliminary prayer at the beginning. And so sometimes, right, you might you might have another teaching that you're attending, and this kind of expanded motivation, maybe they don't go into because maybe the teacher has assumed that you've heard it before and doesn't want to repeat. But generally, you will do this one stanza, and so it's not just mouthing the words, right? But here we say taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. So that mini reflection, right? May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings? You can think of all that as, the teacher is opening up the file and, you're reciting it. Try to generate this feeling in your heart that now you're doing this action and all your actions so you can accumulate the causes for achieving enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay, so with that, we have, we'll recite it 3 times. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly by my collections of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly by my collections of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly by my collections of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay. So then, yeah, remember last week, okay, we sort of gave a uh, general setting the context for our practice. We first talked about how, when His Holiness the Dalai Lama, stop the share. When His Holiness the Dalai Lama gives a introduction to Dharma, he always starts not by talking about the Buddha, but rather talking about our fundamental existence, and starting with this observation that all beings want happiness and they don't want to suffer. Okay. Then we reflected on how actually everything we've ever done from when we were born, right out of our mother's womb until now, has been in this pursuit of happiness and well-being, and also the pursuit to try to avoid and get rid of various sufferings. Then we reflected how, well, if we're honest, most of what we've done up until now has been uh, focused on the outside, arranging the external world, uh, either through accumulating possessions, accumulating friends, accumulating some kind of status in the world. Yes, most of our activities have been focused on the outside. But then, well, that external development alone isn't sufficient to bring the sort of deep, lasting, authentic happiness and well-being that we seek. And that is why we now turn our focus inwards to develop our mind. Because, well, see, in Buddhism, we don't talk about the creator God, but we talk about the mind as the creator. So, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about the Buddhist view of karma and how our actions, both positive and negative, then lead to our experience, our mental experience of happiness or suffering. But then we also know that even how we think about, our experience in that moment can change uh, the quality of that experience. And I think I mentioned, right, my favorite analogy, well, one of them, about the sauna, right? So imagining someone in a very hot room, right? No AC, they're sweating, and they totally complain. Why is it so hot? I'm so hot, all this, right? But then someone in a sauna has that same experience, but then loves it, wants it to be hotter, puts the water on the coals to make it even more hot. Mm. So here we see the external condition of being in a hot room is the same, but one person views it as a hellish experience. The other person views it as being, so pleasant and actually wants it hotter. And the only difference is in the mind. So, um, I didn't mention this last week, but it's a very nice quotation from Shantideva, who says, "Hmm, where could we find enough leather to cover the surface of the earth? But if we wear sandals, it serves the same purpose." You see? So, there's various, thorns, little stones that would, harm our feet. So, since we don't want to experience that, we have basically two possible solutions, right? We can either cover the whole surface of the earth with leather. Well, uh, Shantideva asks, how could we find enough leather to do that? Um, and, by the way, it probably wouldn't be nice to those animals we'd have to kill. Okay. So, in any case, Shantideva says, if we're able to then wear sandals, it has the same effect, right? Hmm? So similarly, Shantideva asks, how could we possibly subdue all the unruly sentient beings in the world? Okay? Means, we're going to meet people who are rude, who are very crass, who do things that we don't like, who are selfish, right? And so there's no way we can then subdue all the beings of the world and make it such that they only do whatever we like, when we like, as we like, right? But Shantideva says, by subduing the mind, it serves the same purpose. Hmm? So then, hmm, on one level, what we are trying to do when we study and practice Buddhism is to kind of make mental sandals for ourselves, whereby no matter what situation we find ourselves in, no matter whom we come into contact with, then we have that protection. Protection from the roughness, right? From the thorns, the thorny people that we come into contact with. Okay? So that is the kind of big picture about Dharma. And then, since we are going to be studying the Buddhadharma, I also went into the life story of Buddha, and particularly, that scene from when the Buddha was still an adolescent, and he leaves the palace for the first time and encounters the sick person, the old person, the dead person, and the renunciate for the first time. Then it is said that even the Buddha's life story should be seen as a lesson in itself for us. So, in this sense, you know, to I think I think many Dharma practitioners uh, are impelled into practicing Dharma through experiencing some hardship. You know, so I know people they yeah would have experienced karma, sorry, cancer at a young age, or the loss of a parent or some kind of suffering experience, and then that sort of wakes them up and then makes them ask deeper questions about the nature of life, what the meaning of life is, and so forth, and then uh, led them to be very sincere Dharma practitioners. Okay. Mm. So of course, better if you can have that level of you know, mm, awareness without having to experience so much suffering in this life. But in any case, we can take it from the Buddha's own life story that those scenes then made him question, why are beings suffering? Why are we in such a predicament? And then seeing, after asking his father, hey, do you have the power to put an end to this? Then his father saying, no, son, I do not. So then seeing that even the the political or economic or these kinds of forces in the world, they alone are not enough to uh, free the beings from their suffering because the suffering is fundamentally rooted in the mind. Hmm? Anyway, then after having gone through the Buddha's life story, we talked about the development of Buddhism and the spread of Buddhism to different parts of the world. And we talked about how then the Buddhism spread from India to Tibet. And there's two transmissions of Dharma to Tibet from India. And in between the two transmissions, well, the Buddhism had declined so much. And therefore, mm, in that intervening period, many wrong views had arisen. Many people couldn't, properly understand or interpret the Dharma. And so Atisha, Dipankara, was invited from India to come to Tibet to clear up the wrong views. And as he, was doing so, then he wrote a very seminal text called The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, Janchup Lamdrung in Tibetan. And then this text became the kind of root text for a new genre of teaching called the Lam Rim. Lam is path, Rim is stages. So the stages of the path to enlightenment. And so this genre of teaching then is very praised, very, yeah, kind of singled out as a very effective teaching because it arranges the teachings in order of practice from beginner all the way to Buddhahood. And so now, many of you, if you've been receiving Dharma teachings before, you would have probably heard about Lamrim, especially in the Gelugpa tradition. And then if you continue, or let's be positive, when you continue to study, then this Lamrim type of teaching will come up again and again. So now, over the first 3 sessions of our small series here this August, then I wanted to go through the entire Lamrim. Yes. And so in the last session, we just covered the very first kind of first topic of Lamrim, and that was the precious human rebirth, right? And the precious human rebirth essentially is to think about how we, having this type of body and mind, have the most extraordinary, amazing opportunity to make progress along the path to enlightenment. We consider all of the external factors. We have access to the Dharma teachings, we're all living in a country where, as of yet, there still is freedom to practice these teachings. And, well, yeah, teachers that can explain them, the facilities to practice like this. And then we have more importantly, the internal condition, where we have interest in Dharma. We have enough intelligence to be able to understand the teachings and at least attempt to put them into practice. So now, with all of these external and internal conditions, well, it is said, even in this body that you now have, right, you can attain the same level of realization as the fully enlightened Buddha. So amazing. So then by reflecting on this opportunity, the point is, when we appreciate the opportunity we have, the thought should come, well, I have to make the best use of it. Okay? So in the normal Lamrim, then the first outline about the precious human rebirth is something like, so we can appreciate this precious opportunity. And then the next outline is kind of exhorting us, right, to take the precious opportunity, right? Then the question is, how do we do that? And so then how we take best use, how do we make best use of this precious human rebirth is then by sort of working towards any one of the goals of the spiritual practitioner that is laid out in Lamrim. So we went over this last week, but I have us go back to the slides. Okay. So then in Lamrim, we talked about these 3 goals of the practitioner, right? So in Sanskrit, it's Purusha, right? Which is person, yeah, quite literally person. Then in the Tibetan, they have Kebu. Now, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche would give commentary on this, so actually, Kebu is sort of glossed as capable being, right? So in general, a person, right, would have the capability to do something, right? And so Rinpoche favored that quite literal translation of the word kebu as capable being. But yeah, different translators do different things. And so I like to keep it simple. It's person. Okay. So then these three persons, they can be distinguished by the goal they are setting for their Dharma practice, right? And then since they have different goals, then they will sort of emphasize and practice different methods to attain those goals. Okay. So the person of the small capacity or the kind of initial practitioner, then their goal is to get a good rebirth in the next life, right? And then how they do that? Well, they inquire as to the causes of a bad rebirth, the causes of good rebirth, and then they see the non-virtue is what is going to cause a lower rebirth. So they abandon that and try to accumulate as much virtue as they can. Then the second practitioner, that of medium capacity, they don't just want a good rebirth in the next life, but they go further and they say, well, even if I'm able to attain that goal in my next life and get a good rebirth again, well, what about the one after that? And well, even in a relatively good rebirth as a human, for example, we still experience so much kinds of suffering. So they don't just want sort of liberation from the lower realms, not being born in lower realms, but they don't want to be born in samsara altogether. So samsara, we sometimes translate as cyclic existence. So this refers to this idea of a continuity of uncontrolled rebirth due to our karma and afflictions. So basically, when we say uncontrolled, well, that means if we don't attain nirvana in this life, if we don't attain higher states of realization, then at our time of death, well, the grasping to our own existence will come up, and this grasping will then activate karma. Now, if we have a virtuous mind at the time of death, well, we can then activate positive karma, but we don't have control, right? We don't really control where we're going to be reborn, nor can we control when we're going to die, nor can we control what kind of experiences we will have that we will confront in this life. And that is all because we have this type of body and mind that then has been projected by previous karma, and we're constantly creating the causes for yeah, different samsaric experiences. Okay? So seeing the faults of that, then the person of medium capacity wants to be rid of all of samsara. Then the person of great capacity, the so-called Mahayana practitioner, right? They want full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so this mind of bodhicitta, right? That just is this wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And I think we have distinguished before these two different kind of goals, these two different levels of realization, that of mere nirvana, mere liberation from samsara, and the fully enlightened state, which is characterized by the complete eradication of all the faults of the mind, as well as the development of all good qualities. Then in this tradition, we say that the Buddha was, or is omniscient. And so the point, the benefit of being omniscient is then one can teach and guide sentient beings in the most effective way for them to be free of suffering. Okay? So I think we covered that last time, right? Yes. That's good to review. Okay. So then this is the overview of the three goals. Then with our precious human rebirth, we can attain any one of those three, actually, right? We can attain a good rebirth. We can attain, liberation from samsara. And we can attain a full enlightenment, right? Or, you know, we can lie on the beach and get a good suntan, right? Or we can, watch all the seasons of whatever show. It's so up to us what we choose to do with this life. So reflecting on the precious human rebirth should sort of exhort us, motivate us to make the best possible use of it. Okay? So all that till now has been reviewed. Now let's go into some new material. So I have a bit of an ambitious plan for this class, okay? You with me? Okay. I'm going to do it like this. I want to go through now the person of small capacity and medium capacity. Okay? Let's do it. I'll try my best, you try your best. Let's see what we can do, okay? All right. So now, person of small capacity, okay? Now, they've already reflected on the precious human rebirth. Okay, so then what's next? Well, as great as this precious human rebirth is, it's not going to last forever because we're going to die. So the first reflection, the first meditation within the small scope, the small capacity practitioner actually is to meditate on death, meditate on impermanence. And so the traditional way this is done is through this 9-point death meditation. Okay. So, um, this is probably worth saying. Let me stop that for a second. Okay. I should say something about meditation. So in general, meditation in Tibetan is the word gom, and gom has a connotation of familiarization or habituation. Okay. So normally, okay, they talk about two different kinds of meditation. One is called a placement meditation. Placement meditation because one places one's mind on one object and then tries not to let it wander off. Okay. So I think many of you would have done the, say, mindfulness of breath meditation. Have you done that? Right? So as you do that meditation, basically what you try to do is just focus on your breath and not get distracted. So in that sense, you're placing your mind, your attention on the breath, the object. Okay? All right. So that type of meditation is maybe what people normally associate with meditation, right? Getting focused, getting concentrated. Mm. But here in the Tibetan tradition, there's an emphasis on another kind of meditation that's called analytic meditation. Analytic meditation, whereby we're going to use analysis, right, to actually evoke different kinds of mental states. And then by evoking those mental states, gom, right, we familiarize. We familiarize with different ways of thinking, right? And hopefully it will then, hmm, hopefully it'll then have a deeper effect in the mind. Okay. So here's one very good example, right? With the reflection on death and impermanence. I think all of us, we know for, some level, right, that we are going to die. But mm, has that recognition of our own mortality really penetrated the depths of our hearts, the depths of our being? Hmm? Here's a thought experiment for you. Okay. Then, if you knew you were going to die, let's say, tonight, right? Then you look back at how you spent your time in the past week. Yeah. I would make a little spreadsheet, right? And then, how many hours doing this, how many hours doing that, how many hours doing this. Okay. So now, after you then kind of catalog and total up how much time you spent doing these various things, okay? If you knew you were going to die today, would you say, oh, yes, great. I'm glad I spent 10 hours in the past week watching YouTube. I'm glad I spent whatever, right? You can check. So if after doing this exercise and you do the reflection and you say, well, yes, wow, I'm so happy, how I spent my last week, then great. If you're not, then probably it's because this reflection on impermanence and death hasn't been strong enough. There is one Tibetan master who said, if I don't reflect on impermanence and death in the morning, I waste my morning. If I don't reflect on impermanence and death in the afternoon, I waste my afternoon. If I don't reflect on impermanence and death in the evening, I waste my evening. Understand? So now the antidote, the solution is by, repeatedly bringing up, and calling to mind this, right? Even the Stoic philosophers, right? Uh, they would say in Latin, memento mori, right? And in kind of, yeah, more modern times, this has become a kind of rallying cry for many, even non-Buddhists, to remember our own mortality. And this has the power to, help us reprioritize our life so that we do what's actually, going to be important and meaningful. Hmm? Okay. I have some nice stories, but we got to stay focused. We're on the clock, okay? We got to cover the material. Okay? So I think you guys understand the reason why we're doing this. It's not to, freak us out so we have so much fear that we're paralyzed, but rather so we, make sure that we're doing the best with the time we do have. All right. So then the way to meditate on death and impermanence then is usually done with this 9-point death meditation. Okay. So yeah, here, right, we have 3 root points. You see, they're in bold. And then each of the 3 have 3 kind of subsidiary points. And that makes 9. Okay. So the first root point is death is certain. Okay. So this 9-point death meditation is pointing to an analytic meditation that we will do, right? And so when we do the analytic meditation, we basically are going to go through each of these points and then reflect, you know? And then through reflection, we'll come to a little kind of aha moment, right? Where the kind of the truth of these sentiments expressed here will kind of arise and it'll hit us, right? And then when we get those like mini realizations, we'll use words, right, to evoke it. But then after that feeling has been, generated, then we just allow our mind to rest in that realization and it'll sink in and hopefully affect us on deeper levels. Okay? So now a lot of the teachings that you'll then receive is then explaining these points that will then later sustain in our meditation. Okay? So now in this 9-point death meditation, first we consider how death is certain, right? So the first point The Lord of death is coming and nothing can be done to turn him away. So yes, kind of like the Grim Reaper in Western world, uh, in the kind of Indo-Tibetan world, they have one like that too. It's called the Lord of Death, a kind of personification of death. That means, yeah, death is coming. Nothing can be done to turn him away. So here, how they normally explain how we reflect on this point is we would consider all of the people throughout history that have died. Mm, And so it's very good to make it personal relative to yourself, your life, right? And so you would have had, uh, family members, friends that you know who have died. And then, even when we open the newspaper and then we see, some celebrity or, great leader, they have died, you know. Recently, Ozzy Osbourne has died. If you haven't heard, my condolences. Okay. Then, you open up the newspaper and it's like, oh, wow, oh, that kind of shock, right? Mm. So just think about all the people who have died. Mm. And then you'll get to that. Oh, yes. Why am I any different? No, no. My body is just like their body, subject to death. Okay. And then hold your mind in that realization. Okay. All right. Next point. The lifespan is constantly diminishing and nothing can be done to add to it. So here I think, the kind of the imagery of an hourglass is very nice. You know? The hourglass, the sand constantly, you know, going out. So however much sand is in that hourglass, every moment that goes by, the sand is running out. So just like that, our lifespan is constantly diminishing. And just like the hourglass, right? It's closed, it's sealed. We can't add more sand to it, right? So similarly, we have kind of karmically, mm, I don't want to say predetermined, right? But the maximum kind of is predetermined, right? Um, and then, well, even before we get to our karmically determined lifespan, there could be different kinds of obstacles that could arise that then would lead to a premature death, right? Um, okay, one small thing. It's very interesting. Lama Zopa Rinpoche once in a teaching. Okay, so we do have like some long life practices within Tibetan Buddhism, White Tara being one of them. Yeah, have you heard? White Tara or Amitayus. Anyway, there are long life practices, but mm, well, one thing is, even His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he gives these long life initiations, right? And so normally, uh, he likes to joke. For a normal kind of Lamrim teaching like this, even for the Dalai Lama, not so many people come. But on a day of a long life initiation, then everyone and their mother come to the teaching, right? So His Holiness once joked that, well, just merely getting the long life initiation, that's not enough. And if you really want long life, then you have to take care of your health. So good diet, good exercise, good sleep, getting your annual checkup, all this, right? So that is, very important to keep in mind, right? Although we're trying to emphasize these, spiritual practices, meditation, and so forth, we can't then just deny the kind of more conventional side of things. Okay. Anyway, I started to say how Rinpoche, hmm, He once said that, Princess Diana, Rinpoche once said that if Princess Diana had practiced White Tara, that she wouldn't have died early. She didn't make it to her karmically kind of possible lifespan. So, in any case, uh, our like kind of possible lifespan is constantly diminishing. And there can be obstacles that we don't even reach that lifespan. But whatever it is constantly diminishing. And well, we should think about that. Even when we're sleeping, even when we're doing things that we think are prolonging our life, like even when we're exercising, right? We're getting closer to death. There's a nice imagery in the Tibetan text of like animals on their way to be slaughtered in the slaughterhouse. And then it is said, every step that that animal takes, they're getting closer to their death. Similarly, with us, every moment goes by is a moment that's bringing us closer to our death. Okay. So, last point in this first root is even while we're still alive, the time to practice is not that much. Okay. So, here, I did this as a kind of, another thought experiment for people. When I would travel to different centers, I would ask, okay, because, I get this a lot, right? Oh, Namjong, you're a monk. You don't have all the worldly responsibilities I have. For you, it's so easy to practice. Okay. But since I have my job, I have my kids, I have this, I don't have time to practice. Right? You guys think that? Thank you. Anyway, so I would ask, the people at the various centers, okay, so let's be real, okay? How much practice can you or do you do per day, right? What do you think? So I'll tell you, in my experience, the all stars, they would practice 2 hours a day. Okay, I mean that's great. That's great. Many people, much less. Many people, it's like, oh, I'm so busy. Okay, 15 minutes. I'm happy if I can practice meditation for 15 minutes. Okay, but let's even just take our all stars, 2 hours a day. Okay, what that means? 24 hours a day, right? 24 hours a day. So two over 24, that's 1 out of 12. That's less than 10%, right? Less than 10% of our time we have for Dharma practice. Okay. So normally in the in the text, it'll say, it'll do it kind of like top down, right? We sleep about 1/3 of the time, and then we, go to work, we commute, we have to then make food, eat food, clean up afterwards, do the dishes, do all this stuff, right? So then we consider, then the time for our Dharma practice is very, very little. Even we think, you know, oh, I'm still gonna live, yeah, 40 more years, right? Then we see, actually, it's not 40 years. It's not 40 years. Because of all these other things that we do that take up so much time. Then while the time we have actually is very, very, very little. And then we also have to consider, right? You know, as we get older, well, the mental sharpness, the mental energy, the memory, all these decline, right? And then when we talk about, I see many people, right? Uh, the knee pains start, They can't sit in meditation for very long, right? Then in Tibetan tradition, we have the practice of the prostrations, right? Have you seen those? 100,000 prostrations, right? I know someone, Lama Zopa Rinpoche told him, do 300,000 prostrations, right? Now, there's different pains in the body, right? It's very hard to practice. And it's not getting easier as we get older, okay? So, thinking in these ways, right? For each of these three root points, then at the end of the three subsidiaries, right? We then make a determination. So then thinking that death is certain and reflecting in that way, we come up with the decision, the determinations. Therefore, I must practice Dharma. I must practice. Okay. So then, second root point, the time of death is uncertain. Okay. So then, first subpoint, the lifespan in this world is in general not fixed. The comma's in the wrong place. Okay. So the lifespan of this world in general is not fixed. All right. So here in the traditional text, they talk about, okay, so this world is called Zambuling in Tibetan, Jambudipa in Sanskrit. Okay. In any case, within Buddhism, they do posit different world systems, and they say in other world systems, for example, the northern continent called Unpleasant Sound, Uttarakuru, they say there beings live to 1,000 years. Everyone fixed. Okay. So point is, we don't have to, go into these other world systems in Buddhist cosmology. We know, we see in this world, in this life, the lifespan is not fixed. You know, the young can die before the old, the healthy can die before the sick, children can die before their parents, all this. So it should not be that controversial. Then, second point, causes of death are many, while the causes to sustain life are few. Well, then we can think of all the various causes of death. Actually, Lama Zopa Rinpoche was very fond of reading the obituaries, right? One, because he made prayers for those who had died. But secondly, just to give sort of uh, more examples of things that can cause death. So of course we have, illness, we have, accidents, we have, war, natural disasters, all these things. But, you know, Rinpoche was also, as he went through obituaries, um, he sort of liked to reflect on these kind of very interesting ways that people would then, pass away quite unexpectedly. There's one story he was fond of telling of someone, I think they're in South Africa, and they were actually giving a kind of speech, at a maybe some kind of awards banquet. That he was giving a speech about how it's so important to, carpe diem, right? Seize the day. And he was actually making the point. He wasn't Buddhist, but just making the speech about carpe diem, making the most of this opportunity because we never know when death is going to come. So right after making that speech, he sits down and is having his dinner and chokes on a chicken bone and dies. So it's like that. The causes of death are many, and the causes to sustain life are few. Then the last point, the body is fragile. So here, we can think, well, even a few sort of, very small, you know, virus or bacteria get into our system, they can cause death, right? In our DNA, a few kind of mutations then cause cancer and then can cause death. Yeah. So, in general, the body is quite amazing. Um, but little kind of imbalances or little viruses or infections can cause our death. And because of that, Nagarjuna says in one of his texts that, you know, given that the body is so fragile, the fact that we wake up the next morning is so amazing. Yeah. So that can be very nice as a practice for our daily life. When you open your eyes in the morning, just be so thankful that you didn't die in your sleep. Understand? Okay. So that was the second root point. The time of death is uncertain. And then the determination to make after that is to then say, I must practice Dharma now. No more procrastination. Hmm? No more putting it off. Okay. So then moving along. Third root point, at the time of death, only Dharma will matter. So here they normally say, the friends won't matter, possessions won't matter, even our body won't accompany us. So here, okay, possessions probably is the easiest to understand. There's that saying, you can't take it with you, right? Can't take it with you. So then in the normal commentaries, there's this imagery. Okay, maybe it works better with Tibetan nomads, but the imagery is that, if you have a hair in your butter and you pull out the hair, none of the butter sticks to the hair. Okay. Tibetan nomads worked a lot with butter. Okay. You understand? So similarly, when we go on from this life to the next, nothing accompanies us, right? Even the richest man or woman can't take even one, penny, one rupee to the next life, right? Then similarly with our friends, whether we have, 10,000 come to our funeral or we die alone in some kind of Himalayan cave, well, no one is going to accompany us to the next life. And even our body that we've cherished from our, as long as we can remember. And we spend so much time, beautifying and so forth, that also isn't going to come with us. So then, what does come with us? Well, the imprints in our mind of the positive and negative actions we've done. And then also, if we have any sort of level of realization, that also comes with us. And then, even if we don't have a full-fledged realization, they do say that any kind of Dharma teaching we receive, or even by reading, for example, the Heart Sutra, that then creates many positive imprints in the mind, that then in future lives, when we do encounter with the teachings, it becomes easier to understand. Hmm. Just share the story. Small story. So, I stayed at Setaje for 17 years, and within the monastery, there were many sort of recognized incarnations, many Rinpoches, many Tulkus. And so there's a story where one of them, okay, we have a big emphasis on memorizing texts, sort of verbatim in the Tibetan tradition. And so there's one, you know, Rinpoche, one incarnate Lama, who was given a text, then, 50-page stanzas, yeah, then read it once, and then was able to recite from memory the whole thing, no mistakes. Then they gave him another text, same thing. Then they gave him a third text, and no. had a lot of trouble, could not memorize. So it was then said to me that it's because, in that lama's past life, he had spent a lot of time memorizing those first two texts. Then so much imprints in the mind, then seeing it just once could then do. But it wasn't just some photographic memory with everything, because the third text, it said that he hadn't memorized, he hadn't spent much time on it, and therefore had difficulty. So, yeah, we can keep that in mind. So then the determination after reflecting on the third point is then we must, practice Dharma purely, right? Not get distracted by other sort of worldly pursuits. Okay? So that's the death meditation. And remember the point of all these meditations. So the point of this one is after we've reflected on the precious human rebirth, we should be so motivated to make best use of it. And then by meditating and reflecting on death, especially the second point, that the time of death is uncertain, then that helps as the supreme antidote to our procrastination and laziness. Okay? There's one nice little quotation. Um, there's a great Tibetan master, Guntang Rinpoche, and he had many students, and it is normally the kind of case that, the lamas, they don't really like to talk much about themselves, but it's up to the students to ask for the lama's kind of life story. Okay. So then the Guntang Rinpoche's students kept asking him, please tell us your life story. And, Guntang Rinpoche would, kind of demur and say, no, no, I'm not important. No, no. But then after much insistence, he agreed. He said, okay, I'll tell you my life story. The first 20 years of my life, I had no interest in practicing Dharma. The next 20 years of my life, I said, I will practice Dharma later. And the last 20 years of my life, I said, I should have practiced Dharma earlier. That's it. So, of course, he was a great practitioner, but sometimes these lamas will say these things for us to reflect. I think it's quite some truth in that, right? All right. So then, after we reflect on death, then the question naturally comes, well, what comes after that? And so, typically in the Lamrim presentation, we then have the presentation of the lower realms. Okay. In general, within Buddhist cosmology, the mind is beginningless, it's also endless, and therefore this concept of reincarnation comes. In our current class, we don't really have the time to get into the various proof and logic about reincarnation, but I would just say for now that the main sort of reason that it hinges on in the traditional presentation is that the nature of the mind is clear and knowing. So there is this sense of awareness, right? We're aware of things. We have a subjective experience. Now, in neuroscience, what they've been able to do, right? They hook up various, equipment, you know, functional MRIs and so forth. Then they're able to kind of, when one has a particular mental state, they can map that to different parts of the brain lighting up or. But, mm, well, there's a philosopher, David Chalmers, not even Buddhist, David Chalmers. He wrote a book, The Conscious Mind. And he describes what he kind of calls the hard problem of consciousness, which is, right? Well, the scientific materialist view equating the mind with the brain, there still is this question, why would different, neurons firing, why would that give rise to this kind of conscious, aware experience in the first place? You understand? Hmm. Then, yeah, many other kind of, Western philosophers get into some very deep and sophisticated uh, kind of arguments and thought experiments. Just one to yeah, kind of give you some food for thought. Uh, Thomas Nagel wrote a an article, "What is it like to be a bat?" Okay, so bats they have sonar, right? They I don't know, I guess they send out some kind of sound waves, and then the sound gets reflected back, and they're able to then know that there's an insect somewhere, they go and eat it, right? So in general, Thomas Nagel gave us this to think about when we then were able to study, as humans, and then we studied the bat brain. We know, a little bit about what parts of the brain, all this. Okay, we can study that as much as we can, but the subjective experience of what it would be to navigate the world using sonar is still, we can't really know unless we're a bat or maybe a dolphin. Yeah. Anyway, so point is within Buddhism, since the nature of the mind is this aware, this awareness, then it is, posited as being just the kind of immaterial, subjective awareness of things. And since a cause has to be concordant with the effect, right? A moment of mind has to then have been created by a previous moment of mind and so forth. Hmm? And then when you go to the time of conception, that moment of mind has to have had a previous moment of mind. And then that's how the, previous lives are posited. Okay. And then similarly, the continuity of mind has no beginning. It also will have no end. And so then when we consider our time of death, then after that, this continuity of consciousness will go on. And so we ask, well, where can it go? Where will it go? Well, there's only two sort of options. There's the lower realms of existence and the higher realms. So in the lower realms, they talk about the hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, and the higher realms of human. And then there's two kinds of, demigods and gods. And then there is normally a big presentation about the various faults of the sufferings of the lower realms, very graphic depictions of what it's like to be in the hells. And a lot of this is very much like what we see in the Western kind of Judeo-Christian concept of hell, like in Dante's Inferno, people being boiled alive in molten copper and so forth. So yeah, I will say, because you know, some of us, it's like maybe we grew up in a kind of, Judeo-Christian background, and then we later came out of that. And then we had this thought that, oh, the church, they're manipulating us, trying to scare us with all this fire and brimstone, right? Yes? No, I don't like that. And so then we come out of our, Judeo-Christian shackles. And then we discover Buddhism. And it's like, oh, so nice. No, no talking about God, just talking about our mind, talking about our experience. talking about how we can develop our mind. Great. And so we then might practice meditation, and then we might have good meditation experiences. And then we start to get interested in, okay, what is the underlying philosophy behind all this? And then here it comes. The hells all over again, you know? And in Buddhism, not only do we have the hot hells, there's also cold hells and surrounding hells and temporary hells and all this. And then it's like, oh my gosh. All right. So I will say the one of the first lamas to bring Tibetan Buddhism to the West, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, he described these lower realms. Now I can stop the screen share. He described the lower realms more as like mental states, right? Psychological states. So, you know, in one of the hells, the reviving hell, then it said that there's two lines of beings that are facing each other. And they're so overcome by anger. Even by looking at the other person, they get angry. And then this violent mind wanting to harm them arises. And so then, like anything they would then pick up, it says it would turn into a weapon, right? So they just pick up some bottle and then it turns into a mace. And then they just run at each other and hack each other to pieces. Okay? But it says until the karma is finished, they have to experience that over and over again. So it's called the reviving hell because at one point, after they've hacked each other, a voice from the sky says, revive. And they all get up. Kind of like some zombie movies, right? These zombies, it's like they can't be killed. And so they like rise up again and they keep going. It's like that. Okay. So that is the depiction in the traditional text. But then we can liken that to some psychological states, right? Right? Have we ever been, so sort of thin-skinned that anything someone says to us, we take very personally, right? And then we get angry at the slightest provocation. And then it's like anything we pick up, we then are using as weapons to harm those around us. Maybe that has happened. Okay. Then the hungry ghosts, they explain it like, okay, there are these beings, and because of miserliness, they then are reborn in a state where they don't even find food or water for many thousands of years, right? And so there's external obscurations, right? They'll see a river very far off in the distance, and then they'll travel there. But then by the time they get there, sometimes the riverbed is totally dried up. Sometimes instead of seeing water, they just see pus and blood. Sometimes there'll be guardians at the river, and then when they try to drink the river, they'll be, hacked. Then there's the internal obscurations, where some of them, right, they'll have knots in their neck. So even if they are able to find some water, they can't swallow. Then others that are depicted having huge stomachs, meaning, well, even if they're able to swallow, it will never satisfy them. So, can we think about a psychological state like this? All right, where uh, you or someone might have this kind of far distant goal, right? Oh, I want to become a millionaire. I want to own my own house. I want to do this. But then by the time they get it, well, they can't enjoy, right? They can't see how fortunate they are. And so still that kind of poverty mindset, even in people who are quite well off, right? The big stomach, never being satisfied, never having enough. Well, maybe it's like that for some. Okay. So in any case, I always like to say, whether we think about these as psychological states or actual physical states, it doesn't really matter. See, the point is, like, for example, when we dream, when we have a nightmare, Hmm? We have that experience as long as we're sleeping, as long as we're having the nightmare of that being real. You know what I mean? So we can imagine if we're reborn in this life, we could go into just some kind of dreamlike state where we're having all these appearances of being hacked to death or all this. And so whether or not it corresponds to some kind of physical external reality or not, well, to the one who's in that experience, it doesn't matter. And so the thought for us is then, well, having these kind of mental states has arisen due to different causes and conditions. Being reborn in the hell realms, they say, is mostly due to anger. Being reborn in the hunger ghost state is due to miserliness and greed. And then the animal state is characterized by ignorance, right? Animals in general, okay, dolphins are intelligent. We do see some level of intelligence. We're not saying that. But in general, the animals are characterized by confusion, by ignorance. If you were to, give them or try to give them a Dharma teaching, right? Try to tell a tiger, hey, maybe you shouldn't kill, have a tofu burger instead. Not gonna be very successful. Okay. So anyway, then after reflecting then on these different types of rebirth, then we inquire as to why we're reborn in such states. Then comes the subject of karma. So this again is very, very, very vast, but I just wanted to cover briefly the main outlines of karma. And that is in this four characteristics of karma. Hello. Okay, here we go. So these are the four general characteristics of karma. Karma is definite, means from our negative actions come negative results like suffering, and from our positive actions come happy results. Then karma increases. So in general, you'll see this thought that the karmic potency of our actions doubles on a day-to-day basis. But even if we don't, quite understand that, there is another imagery given forth by the Buddha that even a large vessel can be filled drop by drop, right? So the point of all this is then we don't say, oh, well, it's just, an ant. It's okay, right? I can kill one ant. It's not a big deal. But is to, kind of tighten our our vigilance so that we don't commit even a slight negative action, causing a slight harm to someone else. Then third point, one doesn't meet with the effects of that which one hasn't accumulated the causes. Mm? So there's two negatives in there. So this means everything we experience is the ripening effect of actions we've done. And then the last point, karma, once created, is not lost. Meaning, even if we don't have the outer conditions to meet with such things, for example, I like to give the example of we all have the karma to be reborn as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Yeah, guaranteed. But in this world, well, they've gone extinct, you know? And so, well, in some other world system at some other time, then the causes could come up. Okay, it might not be exactly like the T-Rex we, see in Jurassic Park, but um, a large carnivorous beast, right? That then just eats all sorts of other animals, very terrifying. We have the karma to be born like that. And so in another world system, when the time is right, all that, then if we meet with the conditions, it'll come about. Okay. So, I had a very ambitious target for this time, and now I'm looking at the clock. That's okay, right? What do they say? If we shoot for the stars, then maybe we'll reach the moon. Something like this, right? Okay. So I did want to leave a little bit of time for question, but I wanted to first cover up a very important, very, very important misconception that can come about when we talk about karma. Okay. So we had seen in the third point that everything we experience is the result of our own karma. Yeah? Okay. So yes, that is said, that is there. But we should not then use that to, one, have a kind of mm, then justifying, right, that other people suffer. Okay. Mm, without getting into it too much, there's this mm, Richard Dawkins. Yeah, have you heard of him? Richard Dawkins. So he is I think, an Oxford biologist, and he sort of headed up this new movement called the New Atheists, right? And anyway, the point of these new atheists, they're trying to be more active and vocal to dissuade people from the religious life because they see that as very problematic. Okay, anyway, he wrote this book, The God Delusion, The God Delusion. And in that, well, he mostly is sort of arguing against, the Judeo-Christian traditions, but Buddhism gets one mention. He mentions Buddhism once. And I tell you, it's not a nice story. He's in Thailand and he's with his host, and they leave the house and they're going out somewhere. And as they're on the street, they encounter a beggar. And so Professor Dawkins is about to give money, and his host says, no, 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 don't give them money. It's their karma to be poor, right? Hmm? So sometimes then karma can be used to then justify, oh, it's their karma. This was used to justify the caste system in India, right? It's their karma to have a low position, so don't help them, right? So it's not like that at all. It's not like that. So really, all of us have so many different karmic seeds in our mental continuum. And so even the beggar we see today, they have the karma guaranteed, right? Just like I guaranteed all of you have the karma to be born as a T-Rex. All of us have the karma to be a billionaire. Even this beggar that we see in the street, right? Yeah. They have the karma to be a billionaire. So we never know. And there's some charities I've heard of, right? Where, they will give training for like job interview skills. They'll give them like nice suits and all this. So they can then kind of get back on their feet. And some of them, they then go on to get jobs and they totally turn their life around, right? So karma is a dynamic process. Karma is not fixed, right? And we're constantly, creating new karma every day. And we can purify previously accumulated karma. So just because we have some kind of situation today doesn't mean it always has to be that way. And the same goes for someone else, right? So we should never use then karma as a justification, thinking that, oh, well, it's their karma to be poor. I'm not going to help them. Okay. We also don't get into a kind of victim blaming, right? Where, oh, here's your karma to receive this kind of harm, right? And therefore we can think, oh, they therefore deserve it in some way. It's not really like that either, right? So I like to use this example. Okay. Um, okay. I think maybe most of you know, I'm from Hawaii. Okay. Aloha. And so, I used to surf. Still, when I go back to Hawaii, I sometimes surf. Yes. And so I imagine, right? Then one day, let's say a surfer, they go out and they go out, past the buoy, right? You know, they go out too far and then they get, into some trouble, right? The lifeguard doesn't say, well, you went out too far, shouldn't have done that, right? The lifeguard will still go out and help. Or, even when there are examples of gross negligence, someone who then, drinks and is intoxicated, then drives anyway and gets into an accident, the doctor will still help them, right? You understand? So we understand, okay, actually the experiences we have are the result of many, 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 many different causes and conditions. Karma just being one of them, right? So although there is karma, then that's not then an excuse for others to harm others too. And even if we accept and we recognize that one's own action did in some way play a role in the experience that they're having, then it's just like the swimmer who goes out too far, or someone who gets into an accident, even being, after having been negligent, we still help them. You understand? So um, karma then should be, not misconstrued in this way. So we should still, get involved, work for, making the world a better place, work for social change, work to, improve the, social, political, economic systems, and not just say, it's their karma. And then the last point, okay, maybe not you guys, but sometimes, right, there's a risk of this. You could imagine someone, they've gone through something very terrible, right? Now, when your friend comes to you with their problem, then some people can say, well, it's your karma, right? But when we experience some kind of problem, then we will go to our friends and vent and tell them, what a, how this person harmed us, what an injustice that is, blah, 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 right? So when it comes to others' misfortune, we're expert on karma. When it comes to us experiencing some misfortune, karma is out the window. Is it? So just please check, check. Okay? So anyway, we didn't cover the middle scope, but we've gotten through the small scope, the initial capability, right? Their main goal is to, get a good rebirth in the next life. So they look to abandon the causes of lower realms and try to accumulate causes for higher realms. Now, I will say this. Even just taking care of karma and living a more ethical life, not harming others, has a lot of benefit even in this life, forgetting about, the existence of future lives, right? Um, yeah, on a very real level, as we go through the world with unsubdued mind, harming others, criticizing others, maybe some of you have even seen negative consequences happen in this life, and through, harming others, uh, you know, friendships, relationships can be, uh, yeah, destroyed. Hmm? So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Maybe we have time for a question. I know we're 1 minute over already. If there's one question. If not, that's also okay. All right. So thank you very much. We'll leave it at that for this week. And well, next week we'll also set very high goals, very high aspiration. Okay. So in the meantime, be well, be happy, and we'll see you next time, okay? Let's just dedicate the merit quickly. Due to all the merit we've accumulated in our time here today, may all beings, vastest of space, quickly be free of all their suffering and attain the state of perfect, complete peace and happiness as quickly as possible. I see a hand up, but you know, it's like in basketball, then the clock runs out, and then when it hits zero, you know, the buzzer sounds. Then even you shoot the ball after the buzzer, doesn't count.
I was just gonna say there's a question in the chat, Venerable. It's
Oh,
and it's there. It's been there.
oh my gosh. Then they got it off before the buzzer.
It's my question. It was my question, Venerable, when you were talking about reflecting on the on death. Did you mean that we do it like we close our eyes? So we'll have to memorize the points you have and close our eyes and think, or do we open our eyes and look at your points and think?
So it can be either. Okay. Very nice. They got the shot off before the buzzer, right? Mm. Then, in the instant replay, they'll go very like frame by frame. Okay, very nice. So thank you for my instant replay. All right. So it can be either, right? In general, many of the experienced kind of practitioners will memorize these Lamrim outlines. And then, you know, you're free. You don't need a text. You don't need your iPad or anything. You can meditate wherever, whenever. Okay? Now,
Okay.
if you don't have it memorized, then yeah, you can have your sheet in front of you. You can open your eyes, read the first point, then meditate, right? But the other thing is too, right? These points, it doesn't have to be in formal practice, right? Actually, it says in the text, even before we leave somewhere, right? We're leaving to go to work, we should wonder and just reflect, maybe I'm not going to come back tonight, you know? Every time we meet someone, we should think, ooh, when we say goodbye, we should think, maybe I'm not going to see them again. When we go to bed at night, we should think, ooh, maybe I'm not going to wake up in the morning like this. So then, this meditation, really, the meditation means familiarization. Familiarization with these thoughts. We can familiarize and habituate ourself anytime. You know, okay, last story. So this is like, in the soccer, the football game, there's the penalty minutes at the end, right? The bonus time. Okay. So once, you guys remember Larry King, right? Larry King? Larry King Live. So once he interviewed His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Larry King asked His Holiness, so how long do you meditate each day? His Holiness said, 24 hours. You understand? Yes. So when we consider meditation as habituating our minds with virtuous thoughts, well, we can do that all the time. We can do that all the time. So don't think, oh, now is my time for meditation practice, you know? And then, oh, ding, the bell rings. Okay, meditation is done. Bye. You just leave. We leave our practice on our cushion. And then we go out into life and totally, forget about all these things we've talked about. Mm-mm. Then, especially because we were talking about how the time for Dharma practice is so little, right? Then we need to bring it in to our daily life. Hmm? Okay?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the final whistle blows. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Okay? Be well, be happy, and be kind to each other, please. Okay? As His Holiness says, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Okay?
Thank you. Good night.